So I don't know what it is with FGO and art servants, but they were like, apparently the arts teams are not eating enough. Not only do they have like the best supports in the game, and not only do they already have two amazingly powerful arts loopers in Berserker Musashi and Space Ishtar, but apparently they were like, they need another servant, so let's just give them Avenger Kama. Just in case people are just missing some very powerful AoE arts looping servant, and that's what we're here to talk about today. If you enjoy FGO content, I upload these videos every single day, and all I ask for in return is a like on the video and a subscribe to the channel. But if you're feeling extra feisty and you want to go that extra mile in showing your support for the channel, you can click that join button to become a channel member. Now with that being said, let's go ahead and just dive right into Avenger Kama, starting off with her hits, where she's rocking 2 quick cards with 4 hits each, 2 arts cards with 3 hits each, and then a 5-hit extra attack, which we all love to see because as a DPS servant, having a very powerful extra attack means she's going to be getting extra NP gain, extra stars, and extra damage in her Brave Chains. She's rocking 52% NP gain, so her NP gain in conjunction with her hits actually isn't all that bad, especially if you're able to get like arts crits or you're able to arts loop with her NP. This really shouldn't matter because you're probably just going to be looping with her anyway, but having a decent NP gain will really help her out a lot. And the main takeaway when looking at her hits is that her hits are actually just really decent. But let's go ahead and start looking at her skills. And she has the same philosophy as most of the other servants this summer, where they're just really good, very powerful skills. Although they at least threw her a bone, kind of in the same sense of Corday, where Corday has a special damage mod against people with Skill Seal, but she can put on Skill Seal on pretty much anybody with her skills. And so they kind of did the same thing with Kama, but we'll get to that as we start getting to her second and third skills. Her first skill is kind of going to help her get going, it being a 30% arts buff that lasts for 3 turns. And then they also gave her a decent bit of survivability, giving her 2 hits of evasion that last for 3 turns. And this is all on a 6-turn cooldown. So the arts buff is going to kind of help up her NP gain just a little bit. And then essentially giving her the Coup dodge skill is really going to help out her survivability in harder content or get some boss fights. Overall, just a very solid skill to get her going. It just essentially gives her the arts buff she needs, and then is giving her a very decent bit of survivability. Skill 2 is giving her the thing that we're seeing with a lot of the other FGO servants this summer, and that she's getting 20% NP damage that lasts for 3 turns, and then she has a 100% chance to charm all enemies for 1 turn on a 7-turn cooldown. Now what I mean is that a lot of the servants this summer were getting a card buff, and then they're also getting NP damage buff to inflate up their numbers just a little bit. Which, if you don't know what I'm talking about, the NP damage buff multiplies into their attack buffs and their card damage buffs, you know, like the Buster buff, the Quick buff, the Arts buff, stuff like that, and it actually gives them more damage. For instance, if you had a 30% Buster buff and a 20% NP damage buff, you're not actually just getting 50% damage. Those two are actually multiplying into each other to actually give you more damage than just 50%. It's not additive, it's multiplicative. So having both of these buffs is actually very good for actually buffing up her own NP damage. I don't know why they didn't make this party-wide, because it's only 20%. You would think they would have maybe made this a party-wide buff to kind of help her out a little bit, because it's on a 7-turn cooldown, which is a little insane. I understand why it's on such a long cooldown, because it's an AoE charm. I mean, Shuten Doji has a very similar skill and it's very powerful. Or even Chinese Emperor Man, who has the AoE stun on his second skill. Like, you have very powerful skills like this, and I understand why they're on a long cooldown. But I just think they needed to, like, justify it a little bit more. Maybe give her 30% NP damage. It wouldn't have buffed up her damage too much to an insane degree, but it would have been nice. Or just make it a 20% NP damage buff for the entire party. I think that actually would have been really nice for Kama, but again, it is still a good skill at the end of the day. And more importantly, getting that charm off on the entire enemy team is going to be very crucial when it comes to her NP. But we'll talk about her NP in just a little bit. Let's talk about her third skill, where they gave her a 50% battery, and then they give her an on-attack buff, which whenever she attacks an enemy, she gives them this Heartfelt Blaze debuff. And then she gets a special damage mod against people that have that debuff on them. So basically, it's a way for her to inflate her damage if she's in, like, say, a boss fight or something, where you're actually not just going to be looping continuously and you can actually get your face cards off. It's going to be very good in that kind of content, because it's going to mean that she's not going to fall off damage-wise. So it's a very powerful skill, and I mean, I don't need to say why it'd already be good anyway, because she has a 50% battery. That in and of itself is already good enough. Basically, just makes her compatible with any and all event CEs, because most of the good gold event CEs have a 50% battery attached to them. So she's just going to be absolutely crazy when it comes to events. And then even for harder content, I mean, who doesn't want a 50% battery in the middle of a fight and they're like, oh man, I wish I could use my NP. Oh, there's my battery. And then you just blow up whoever you're fighting. But overall, all 3 of her skills do round out to being quite good. Getting the arts buff is just always going to be good for art servants, because it's buffing up their NP gain. It's buffing up their arts card damage, which is obviously always going to be good for them. Having the Coup dodge skill in conjunction with the charm means she actually has very good survivability, because she can either shut down the entire enemy party for one turn, or just try to dodge through everything. Then the NP damage multiplying into her arts damage actually does give her pretty decent damage overall. 50% battery, dude, don't need to tell you why that guy is good. That is just insanely broken. And then you have the Heartfelt Blaze debuff that she's getting, which essentially is, again, going to make her very good when it comes to boss content. Because as long as she's getting Brave Chains off, it's almost like the Hokusai effect, right? If you want to look at it that way. You know, where Hokusai, if she hits people with her arts card when her third skill is up, it's going to allow her to lower their defense and everything and allow her to actually do some decent damage. It's very similar to that, where if she's in a fight for a decent bit of time, and she starts stacking up these debuffs, she starts doing really, really insane damage. But now, let's go ahead and talk about her NP. And what this is doing is it's an AoE Arts NP with 4 hits, so the hits are decent, right? You can loop with her. She is lowering all enemies' defense by 20% for 3 turns. Unfortunately, it does not activate first, which means this is only going to be useful in like more difficult content where you can keep hitting the same enemy over and over with your NP, but it does make it very good for that, because then you now have the arts damage multiplying into the NP damage, multiplying into the defense down damage. So don't be afraid to bring her to more difficult content, because if you can hit people with numerous NPs, they are going to crumble quick, fast, and in a hurry. But then her overcharge is giving her 150% to 200% extra damage if the enemies are charmed. And if you'll remember, her second skill is an AoE charm. So basically, you can get to the third node for farming, slap this on everybody, and then just Exodia obliterate all of them, right? Like, nobody's going to stand a chance when she comes in there. And then also, if you have like a strategy, like with maybe your NP1 comma, and you're finding that you don't have enough damage, you can actually pop her third skill, and then lead off with like her quick or buster, just whatever cards you have before her NP, to get that little bit of extra damage with the Heartfelt Blaze buff on that third skill. And you can just milk out a little bit of extra damage if you're finding that you're struggling. So overall, Kama just comes out to being a very insane farming servant that'll also be very good when it comes to more difficult content. If you were to kind of press me down and ask me who I think is better between Space Ishtar and Kama, well, I'll probably just do a comparison video between the two. But they almost seem to be filling a bit of different roles. Like, it seems like Space Ishtar is definitively probably going to be like the best farming art servant in the game. But then Kama is going to break away a little bit. Instead of like being insanely good for farming, which she is insanely good for farming, but instead of being like the king of farming, she's breaking away a little bit and is going to be very insanely good when it comes for like boss fights and anything like that. So do keep that in mind. Also, Berserker Musashi's on the table. We'll probably just end up doing 2 comparison videos. We'll probably compare Kama to Space Ishtar and Kama to Berserker Musashi. All that good stuff to come forward here on the channel. I'd also like to note, though, before we leave, that she has an insane amount of passive skills. Do keep in mind that as an Avenger, she gets like all of those crazy Jalter skills where she's regenerating NP every single turn. If she gets barely touched, she refunds 400 billion% NP. And then she herself is also immune to being charmed, which is pretty nice. Not going to be all that useful, but if you know if you're fighting a boss that does have the charm, or like they like to have the charm span going on. For instance, we just had the Gorgon fight over here on the NA version of the game for Guildfest, and Uriel and Steno do seem to really like slapping on some charms on the people. Although Steno's is more tied to males, but you guys get what I'm saying. If you're going into a fight where you know there's going to be a lot of charms going on, then you can definitely bring her and just be like, I don't have to worry about that at all whatsoever. But I'd love to hear what you guys think about Avenger Kama over here. This is a servant that everybody was really hoping was going to be actually true in the leaks, and it turns out she actually was going to be coming out. We missed out on Assassin Adelante, which is a little unfortunate, and we didn't end up getting a Reshkagal, but I think this summer is just shaping up to be pretty good in general. I think all of these servants are very powerful. It's kind of like a massive buff to the arts meta, with us getting basically the arts version of Sanzo, then getting a new updated version of Chloe, then now we're getting a third version of the Space Ishtar Berserker Musashi crazy arts looper person. Quick got a pretty decent buff with Okitan over here. So let's just see what Canis and Sei over here are going to shape out to be. You know, we'll talk about them in the coming days, but hope you guys enjoyed. Leave me know what you think about these servants in the comments down below. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace. Late, guys.